The heavy deadbolt slammed shut at exactly 11:03 p.m., echoing louder than any birthday song could have. That was the only thing Mary got from her stepmother on her 18th birthday. Inside the warm house, her father, David, watched her through the frosted glass before turning away. He didn't look sad, he looked relieved. The Minneapolis wind howled like a living thing, biting her skin as she stood outside with a small backpack and $152 in her pocket. The cold cut through her coat like knives, but she didn't cry. She just stood there, staring at the locked door, realizing it wasn't her home anymore. Mary started walking toward the old garden shed 3 blocks away, her usual hiding spot. The snow crunched under her boots and her breath turned to fog in the bitter air. As she crossed the corner, a hand shot out from the shadows and gripped her wrist tightly. Startled, she turned and saw Miss Grace, the homeless woman who lived by the bus stop. "Don't go to that shed tonight, child," Miss Grace whispered, her voice shaking. "Get a hotel room. If you go there, you won't wake up." Her warning cut through the wind sharper than the cold itself. Mary stared at her, confused. "What do you mean? Why shouldn't I?" she asked. Miss Grace's eyes darted toward the direction of the shed. "Just promise me don't go back there," she said urgently. Mary nodded slowly, unsure whether to believe her. The wind screamed louder, pressing against her like a wall. She turned toward the distant glow of a flickering motel sign, the Starlight Inn. Step by step she walked toward it, her body numb but her mind racing. Behind her, the house stayed dark and silent, as if she had never lived there at all. The motel lobby smelled like old smoke and loneliness. A tired man sat behind the counter scrolling through his phone, barely glancing up when Mary dropped $40 on the desk. "Room 12, he muttered, sliding a key across. He didn't ask her name or age and she didn't offer it. In the small room, the heater rattled weakly as it tried to fight the cold. Mary sat on the edge of the bed, still in her coat, staring at the cracked wallpaper. Her mind replayed her father's face, calm, distant, and empty as the lock turned. She had spent years believing her father was a victim, trapped under her stepmother's control. "He's just scared," she used to tell herself. But tonight proved otherwise. He hadn't been forced, he had chosen silence. Every "just stay quiet," and "don't make her angry," had been another piece of herself traded away for his comfort. Mary realized that he wasn't a hostage, he was a volunteer. The warmth behind that door was his peace, and she was the price he paid for it. Wrapping her arms around herself, she whispered, "You didn't lose me, Dad. You sold me." Mary stayed awake through the night, listening to the heater clatter like it was coughing out its last breath. The air in the room smelled of dust and old cigarettes, but it was better than freezing outside. Her body was trembling, not from the cold but from the shock settling into her bones. For the first time she had nowhere to return to. She wasn't a daughter anymore. She was a problem they had decided to throw away. She checked the door twice, then wedged a chair under the handle. The world outside was still, silent, and merciless. By sunrise the storm had calmed. The streets were glassy with ice, every sound swallowed by the cold. Mary found Miss Grace waiting at a small diner, hunched over a mug of black coffee that looked older than time. "You didn't go to the shed, did you?" Grace asked without looking up. "No," Mary replied, taking a seat. Grace nodded once, her eyes sharp and knowing. "Good," she said quietly. Then she pulled out an old tablet with a cracked screen and pushed it across the table. "There's something you need to see, child." Mary leaned closer as the video began to play. It was grainy night footage, the timestamp showing 11:45 p.m., barely an hour after she'd been thrown out. A figure appeared on the screen. It was Ryan, her stepbrother. He was carrying a shovel. "What is he doing?" Mary whispered. Grace didn't answer. They watched as Ryan started piling heavy snow against the shed door, packing it until it looked like a wall. He checked the boarded windows, then stood still facing the shed. A twisted smile spread across his face before he typed something into his phone and walked away. Mary felt her stomach drop. "He wasn't just sealing it," she said slowly. "He was trapping me in." Grace nodded. "You would have suffocated before sunrise," she said softly. "That wasn't an eviction, child. That was a tomb." The words hit Mary like a slap. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen, replaying the moment again and again. Her breath came fast and shallow. "Why would he do that?" she whispered. "I was already gone." Grace's eyes darkened. Biz, you turned 18. That means your trust fund just opened. The realization hit Mary so hard it made her dizzy. You mean, if I didn't sign for it, your father gets it, Grace finished. They needed you out of the way. Mary felt something cold spread through her chest, heavier than fear. They tried to kill me for money, she said, her voice trembling with fury. Grace nodded. And they almost did. Mary clenched her fists. Then we're going to the police, she said. Grace smiled faintly. Good girl. But after that, she said, her tone turning sharp, we're going to the bank. Grace's car was old and loud, smelling like worn leather and rust, but it started on the first try. Mary sat in the passenger seat with the tablet clutched tightly in her hands. The snow outside glittered in the morning light, hiding the darkness of the night before. When they reached the police station, Grace led her straight to the front desk. We need to report attempted murder, Grace said calmly. The officer's eyebrows shot up, but once he saw the footage, his tone changed. Within minutes, they were sitting across from Detective Harris, a weary man with tired eyes. Detective Harris played the video 3 times before speaking. That's strong evidence, he said slowly. Attempted manslaughter at least. He rubbed his chin thinking. We'll bring him in. Mary waited for relief, but instead her chest tightened. What about my stepmother? She asked. She planned this. I know she did. Harris sighed. The video only shows the boy. We can question her, but the warrant is for him. Mary nodded, even though disappointment burned in her throat. She wanted justice, but it felt like the system was only giving her half of it. An hour later, Ryan was in custody. Mary sat in the waiting area, her knees bouncing. Grace handed her a cup of vending machine coffee. You did the right thing, Grace said. Mary nodded, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. Just when she thought it was over, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Come home and sign the papers, or the cold won't be the only thing that hurts you. Her fingers went cold as she read the next line. I bailed him out. He's angry. She looked up, pale. She bailed him out, Grace. My stepmother bailed him out. Grace's expression darkened. It's called an extinction burst, she said quietly. When a manipulator starts losing control, they act out. They'll do anything to get that control back. Mary stared at her. She's not giving up, is she? Grace shook her head. Not until the deadline passes. You've got 48 hours before the trust fund closes. If you don't sign it, she loses everything. The words made Mary's pulse quicken. Leslie wasn't just desperate, she was dangerous. So what do I do now? Mary asked. Grace looked out the window. Now we plan our next move carefully. Before they could make that move, Mary's phone buzzed again, this time with social media alerts. Her old friends were messaging her, asking if she was okay. Confused, she opened her Facebook page. There it was. A long post from her stepmother claiming Mary had a mental breakdown and was using drugs. She's trying to ruin me, Mary said, voice breaking. Grace read the post and nodded slowly. She's trying to control the story before you can tell yours, she said. Let her talk, child. Tomorrow we'll speak louder, with truth and in public. Mary felt her chest tighten with anger as she scrolled through the lies her stepmother had posted. Old friends commented with pity, some with doubt, others defending her. She's making me look like I've lost my mind, Mary whispered. That's exactly her plan, Grace replied calmly. She wants people to doubt you before the truth comes out. Mary clenched her fists. Then we fight back, she said. Grace smiled faintly. We will. But not online. Tomorrow we go to the bank and prove who really holds the power. Mary nodded, determination replacing fear. Then let's make tomorrow count. Morning came quietly, the city wrapped in pale sunlight. Mary woke up with a clear mind and a stronger heart. She pulled her only formal clothes from her backpack, a plain black blazer and a white blouse she'd worn for a school debate once. Grace watched her dress and nodded with pride. You look ready for war, she said. Mary smiled faintly. I'm done being their victim. Together they left the small motel room behind. The streets glistened with melting snow as they headed downtown toward First National Bank. Mary's pulse quickened, but this time it wasn't fear, it was purpose. The bank lobby smelled of polished wood and quiet wealth. Marble floors reflected the light from tall windows, and every sound echoed softly. Mary walked straight to the receptionist's desk. I'm here to see the senior trustee for the Harrison estate, she said firmly. The woman blinked, eyeing her worn blazer. Do you have an appointment? I don't need one, Mary replied, sliding her ID across the desk. I'm the beneficiary. Before the woman could respond, the glass doors behind Mary opened. Her stepmother, Linda, walked in with her father and a man in a cheap gray suit. Mary, Linda said in a voice dripping with fake concern. Thank God we found you. We've been worried sick. She moved closer, arms open, pretending warmth. Her father stood behind her, avoiding Mary's eyes. Stop, Mary said coldly, raising a hand. You can drop the act. Linda froze mid-step. Sweetheart, you're confused. Let's go home. There's nothing to talk about, Mary said firmly. She turned to the receptionist. Call the trustee. Now. The lawyer beside Linda stepped forward. Miss, your parents have medical authority, Grace cut him off sharply. Unless you have a court order, she's in charge. Back off. The elevator timed. An older man in a tailored suit stepped out, adjusting his glasses. Miss Mary, he asked politely. I'm Mr. Henderson, the senior trustee. I've been expecting you. Linda lunged forward. You can't let her sign anything, she snapped. Henderson gave her a cool stare. Mrs. Linda, the trust is clear. The beneficiary turns 18, she signs. Unless you have a court order, this is her legal right. Linda faltered, speechless. Henderson gestured to the elevator. This way, Miss Mary. As the doors closed, Mary saw the panic in her stepmother's eyes, and knew her power was finally ending. Inside the trustee's office, everything felt quiet and heavy with importance. The desk was wide, the papers neatly stacked, and the air smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. Mr. Henderson guided Mary to a chair and handed her a pen. We'll go through each document carefully, he said. Mary nodded and began signing her name on every page, her hands steady, her heart racing. Each signature felt like a piece of freedom being reclaimed. Grace stood by the window watching proudly. You're doing well, child, she said softly. Keep your head high. You've earned this moment. When the last paper was signed, Mary leaned back and let out a long breath. Mr. Henderson smiled faintly. Congratulations, Miss Mary. The estate is officially yours. Mary looked down at the stack of papers, her name written over and over. There's one more thing, she said quietly. The secondary accounts, the ones my father and stepmother use. Henderson looked at her curiously. The allowance cards? Yes, Mary replied. Cancel them. Freeze everything they touch. Henderson typed a few quick commands on his computer. Done, he said. They no longer have access to a single cent. Mary's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. For the first time in years, Mary felt peace. Not the fragile kind that came from silence, but the real kind that came from control. Henderson cleared his throat. Before you go, he said, pulling out a sealed envelope, there's a final clause your grandfather added before his passing. It activates if you're ever found to be in distress caused by your guardians. Mary frowned. What kind of clause? A negligence liability clause, he said. It funds a full private investigation and prosecution against anyone who harmed you. He placed the envelope in front of her. That includes your guardians. Mary opened the envelope slowly. Inside were bank records, legal documents, and receipts, all evidence of Linda's misuse of the trust's money. Henderson continued, your grandfather suspected manipulation. He left instructions to make sure you were protected, even after he was gone. Mary's eyes widened as she flipped through the papers. So, the money they tried to steal is going to pay for their own punishment? Henderson nodded. Exactly. Would you like me to initiate the proceedings? Mary looked at Grace, who gave a small approving nod. Yes, she said firmly. Proceed. For the first time her voice carried authority. A week later the bitter cold finally broke. Snow melted from the rooftops, dripping like a quiet rhythm of renewal. Mary stood in the doorway of her new apartment, a small, bright studio with sunlight flooding through wide windows. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. She unpacked slowly, each item a step toward freedom. The knock on the door made her pause. She looked through the peephole and froze. Her father stood there, looking frail and hollow, his coat too thin for the weather. For a moment old memories stirred. Then she unlocked the chain, but didn't open the door fully. "Mary," her father said softly, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Please, can I come in? It's freezing out here." His voice trembled not just from the weather but from guilt that clung to him like frost. Mary stared at him through the small gap in the door. "Why are you here?" she asked. He rubbed his hands together, eyes darting nervously. "We lost the house," he said. "Linda's gone. She took the last of the money before the charges came down. Ryan's in juvenile detention. I have nowhere to go." He looked at her desperately. "I'm still your father, Mary." Mary's jaw tightened. "You stopped being my father when you locked that door," she said quietly. "You stood there and watched me freeze." His lips quivered. "I didn't know it would go that far," he whispered. "I thought she just wanted to scare you." "I didn't think." "You didn't think," Mary interrupted coldly. "You calculated. You weighed my life against your comfort and chose comfort." Her father's face crumpled, his eyes filling with regret. "Please, Mary, just for one night," he begged. "I have nowhere else to go." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Neither did I," she said. He reached out a trembling hand toward her, but she didn't move. "Please, I'm begging you," he said. Mary slipped her hand into her coat pocket and pulled out a small rusted key, the key to the old garden shed. She held it up between them. "Do you remember this?" she asked softly. His eyes widened. "Mary, don't. You turned this key once to lock me out," she said. "Now I'm giving it back to you." She placed the cold metal in his hand, her eyes hard. "You can use it to open your own door this time. Wherever that may be." Her father's hand shook as he stared at the key, his face pale with shame. "Mary, please," he whispered again, but she had already started closing the door. The click of the lock echoed like a final verdict. For a moment she stood still, breathing deeply, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she turned away from the door. Inside, the apartment was warm, filled with the soft scent of soup and the sound of quiet laughter. Grace sat by the window reading while Chloe, Mary's childhood friend, stirred a pot on the stove. "Was that him?" Grace asked without looking up. Mary nodded slowly. "He's gone now," she said. Grace closed her book and smiled faintly. "Good. You've given back what he left you with, nothing." Mary sank onto the rug, feeling the sunlight on her face. "I thought I lost my family," she whispered. Grace shook her head gently. "You didn't lose a family, child. You escaped one." Chloe set down 2 bowls of soup and smiled warmly. "You built a new one," she said. Mary took a deep breath, the warmth finally sinking into her skin. For the first time in 18 years she wasn't cold. She was home. The afternoon sun poured through the window, painting golden lines across the floor. Mary watched the light dance on the walls and felt something inside her settle. The fear that had followed her like a shadow was finally gone. "You know," Grace said, sipping her tea, "when I first saw you that night I saw myself 20 years ago, standing in the cold thinking I had no one." Mary looked at her, touched. "Then why did you help me?" Grace smiled softly. "Because someone once helped me too. You don't break the cycle by revenge, child. You break it by kindness." Mary nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "But you did both," she said. "You showed kindness and you helped me get justice." Grace chuckled. "Justice is just truth with a backbone." They both laughed quietly. Chloe sat beside them with 2 mugs of cocoa. "You know," Chloe said, "the way you handled them, that was strength." Mary shook her head. "It wasn't strength, not at first. It was survival. But now," she looked out the window at the melting snow. "Now it's peace." The 3 women sat together in silence, the room filled with calm instead of fear. A gentle knock came on the door, softer this time. Mary glanced at Grace, who nodded toward it. "Go on, see who it is," she said. Mary peeked through the peephole. It was Detective Harris. She opened the door cautiously. "Good afternoon," he said kindly. "I just wanted to let you know. The charges against Linda and Ryan have been confirmed. The investigation found evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. They won't be bothering you again." Relief washed over Mary like a wave. "Thank you," she said softly. Harris nodded. "You're tougher than most people I've met," he said. When the door closed again, Mary leaned against it for a moment, breathing deeply. Grace smiled knowingly. "Feels lighter, doesn't it?" "It does," Mary said. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm running anymore. Chloe handed her a spoonful of soup. You're not, she said. You're home. Mary smiled, the warmth of the moment wrapping around her like a blanket. She looked at both women, the family she never expected but always needed. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. Grace raised her cup in a toast. To new beginnings, she said. And to warm homes that stay unlocked. Outside, the snow had stopped completely. The city was thawing, sunlight bouncing off every icy corner like a promise. Mary sat by the window, writing in a small notebook, the story of her survival, not to relive the pain, but to remind herself of what she overcame. If you've ever had to walk away from family to save your peace, she wrote, you didn't fail them, you freed yourself. She closed the notebook and smiled. Behind her, Grace hummed softly and Chloe laughed in the kitchen. For the first time in her life, Mary felt whole. She was safe. She was home.